Good evening again, everybody. We're here again. I feel like this is a daily ritual for me now. In fact, the kids know, like, oh, it's webinar time. I'm not talking to them for an hour. So I have my little webinar corner that starts every evening. And here we go. And we have joining us today, Gary. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you. Great to be here with you again.
Yeah, I haven't seen you in person in a while, but the first time we met was in person
It
at a
was.
conference. And Gary, just so everybody knows, when you go to an event, a conference, when you're part of a community, there's always that one guy who's the OG, the guy that knows everybody and everybody knows the guy. And that's him. You know, Third Rock has been around for quite a while, pioneer in terms of bringing health to personal care products and beyond, the science. And we're going to dive into that and why this is a need. Uh, just before we get going, if anyone has questions along the way, drop in the Q&A box. We will get to questions later on. Just make sure you go into the Q&A box as opposed to the chat because they may get lost as people keep chatting. But we'll get to your questions. First, we're going to get to the topic at hand, which is this, looming threat that for most of us, is sort of under the radar because it's not as obvious as your food or as your sort of stress levels and lack of sleep and the things that you viscerally feel on a daily basis. Instead, the topic, environmental threats and chemicals, etc., and toxins, mostly go unregistered in terms of your awareness, right? And that's where Gary's been doing an amazing job building solutions, but firstly identifying what the problems even are. So first of all, again, thanks for being here tonight, man. This is gonna be an awesome
Thank
conversation.
you. Thanks, Cash. Great to be with you. Great to be with you.
Yeah, it's good, man. So, I know that your work started, let's say, big corporate, right?
Right?
And
Right?
you've realized there was a problem to solve, and you figured out a solution to these problems, and then all of a sudden they didn't want it. And then you took over the solution and started driving it home for people. But how bad is the problem when it comes to, say, let's take something simple like sunscreen, for example. How
Right.
bad is the actual toxic load?
Well, that's a great question. So you're right. I actually was in corporate for a long time, and I still am involved in corporate because as you know, I do patent work for a living.
Yeah.
This is a side job, but the sunscreen issue is a big deal. Toxicity of sunscreen was and remains a big deal. And that all happened for me in my life, where I had two young guys, different times, surfed with them, both got melanoma, both got diagnosed, both got told the same thing by two different dermatologists. Which, by the way, and I won't go into that deep hole, but hard to get a dermatologist to even see you these days.
Hmm.
They're so busy because of skin cancer. But excuse me. But what happened was they both got told if you keep surfing, you'll get melanoma again. So at age 20, they quit.
Hmm.
So that told me something, that this whole sunscreen thing is interesting. And then in 2000, Margaret Schlumpf, who's a toxicologist, University of Zurich, Switzerland, slathered the back of female rats with regular sunscreens, the organic sunscreens, the ones that are methoxycinnamate, avobenzone, oxybenzone, something called PABA, which is paraaminobenzoic acid. Those were all the sunscreens that are still being in use today. They're called organic because they're carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, but they have nothing to do with organic foods or organic
Yeah.
drinks. And so they were found to be endocrine disruptors, female mimicking hormones. And it immediately drew my interest. It was I'm a chemist by training and a PhD chemie, and because I get a journal article every week, one of the front page articles was, "Are the sunscreens safe?" This is in 2000, a long
Hmm.
time ago now. And so started reading about that. Had been surfing with these guys, realized there was a problem, and she sent me her manuscript. Those are early days of the internet and email, and so she actually sent me physically her manuscript, which showed exactly what was going on, and that the toxicity was so high that these female rats' uterus was growing abnormally large, and that's how she determined they were endocrine disruptors. Um, and so, for your audience, for the people that are listening in tonight, toxicity really has to do with cell death. My definition for it is, anything that causes death to cells, cell death. And, that's a broad, ubiquitous way of defining toxicity. This was a lot more specific because it was specific to endocrine disruptors, which are female mimicking hormones. The biggest one on the planet, of course, is the pill, which, changes the menstrual cycle for women and the ability to get pregnant. And of course, it gets into the air and it gets into the water. So we're exposed to endocrine disruptors all the time. Soy happens to be one that has genistein in it, which is a naturally occurring substance, so it has a very high concentration of phytoestrogenic compounds. And depending on your ability to cope with that, that can be toxic too. So, if you take toxicity as something that is cell death, and you look at the sunscreens, well, the last thing you want to do is put stuff on your skin in the presence of the sun, which is, arguably the biggest free radical generator on the planet, and is going to definitely in somehow impair your immune system. And now you're putting stuff on that is going to cause you to have endocrine disruption, which means your perspiration, your urination is all going to be impaired in the presence of the sun. And then on top of it, if you throw on top of that the fact that these two young guys probably ate at, let's just say, fast food restaurants every day, okay, their immune system probably was impaired because they didn't have it in their family. One of them was very light skinned, so he was susceptible, of course. But even so, at age 20, you shouldn't be getting any form of skin cancer. If you live to be 65 in the United States, you will get, there's a 50-50 chance you might get some form of skin cancer. So that's obviously something else that's going on. And of course, the atmosphere has changed. Back in the 90s, we were told about the ozone hole over Australia. And I actually had been in Australia in the late 90s. And there they talk about the water quality, they talk about the air quality, they talk about the sun intensity, and everybody lives on the coast, almost 90% of the population. So they're very scared of sunscreen. And they started using inorganic sunscreen additives. So the titanium dioxide and the zinc oxide. So I started looking at all that and trying to determine, based on your original question, what's really going on here and how high is the toxicity? Well, it turns out that once her study, Margaret Schlumpf's study, was published everywhere and got a lot of notoriety, in Denmark, they decided that they were going to remove all of the sunscreens from the shelves. And that was 2005. And so the EU, the European Union, said, hey, Danes, you guys, you can't do that. So they put it back on the shelves a year later, but they published a study, and they found that the endocrine disruptors were not that bad. They only got into the urine and the blood plasma.
Not a big deal.
So you can take that, and the result of that article was that the summary is, it said, well, it's probably okay for adults because it's just a small concentration of endocrine disruptors that get there. But for young children and infants, it's probably a good idea not to use sunscreen.
So, to that point, we now have this phenomenon in the United States where 1 in 3 teenage girls has considered taking her life. Suicide. Wow. Yeah, 30%. Unbelievable, right? And specifically young girls. And why? Because they are more susceptible to the outcome, the swings, that cascade of hormone disruption and how bad they feel.
Right.
We also have 30% of women trying to get pregnant in the United States now needing fertility treatment. That number is a third, right?
Right.
And these numbers, and you kind of see this 30% number across the board when you look at problems. And it's funny because when we look at things genetically, you also see about 30% of women falling in either an estrogen dominant or estrogen toxic bucket, where the same threat just means so much more, right? Yes. And going back to what you said about food, there was a study done at Baylor where they took some number of, I think it was dogs actually, and they fed half of them an American diet, high in seed oils, linoleic acid, starches, and half of them carnivore, just straight meat. And they put them out in the sun. And of the animals that ate the American diet, 25% got skin cancer.
Wow.
Of the animals that ate the carnivore diet, zero.
Amazing.
Zero. Now, having
Amazing.
said that, you still need protection from other things like aging, and the skin needs protection. You're not meant to be out in the peak midday sun all day, right?
Right.
And so then what do you do to actually protect yourself? Because we still need to get out and do things. And if the bad news of like, okay, no sunscreen, what do you do?
Right, right. Well, I know a lot of people have probably turned off on sunscreen completely. I started this whole thing making a new sunscreen, making something that's completely different, of
Mhm.
course, patented, of course, all the intellectual property put together to make something really radically different.
Mhm.
And so the answer to your question is it really has to do, like you said, with overexposure. Well, let's
Yeah.
talk about that because overexposure happens in about 20 minutes for Caucasians in the United States and Canada. And even people who have more melanin in their skin, they're even if they're darker skinned, let's just say 40 minutes, twice
Yeah.
as long. And what does that mean? Well, people don't understand what SPF is. SPF is sun protection factor, which was developed basically by the FDA to tell us that if you are using an SPF product that's, let's say, SPF 30, and it takes you 20 minutes in the presence of the sun to start to turn pink, then SPF sun protection factor is 30, let's say a 30 SPF sunscreen times 20 minutes is 600 minutes of protection. That's 10 hours.
Mhm.
Well, of course, 20 minutes, I'm just getting in the water, right? I'm already overexposed by the time I get in the water by
Yeah.
definition. And what does that mean? Well, your skin's a pretty good indicator of how your body, your skin's your biggest organ, and your skin's going to tell your body, hey, I'm getting overexposed to what? Well, you've got all the vitamin D you need for the day. That's really what your body's saying. And
Yeah.
now you're starting to turn pink, and you should, try to get at least out of the sun. Or the other choice, if you're going to be active outside all day, is put something on. And of course, you can't put clothes over your face.
Mhm.
And you can put it on your head, but again, not everybody's going to wear a hat. And you can't wear a hat when you're surfing too well, unless it's a hoodie,
Yeah.
and that's another long story. But the bottom line is, as soon as you get overexposed, you should have something, but it's not UVB. So there's something that I gave your folks. They can show it if they want to. It's a plot, and the plot helps describe what's really going on. It's a plot of UVA and UVB, and I think they can pop it up on the screen for us, maybe. And what it shows is it shows that there is a big difference between UVA and UVB. So that plot shows that if you look at that wavelength, you see UVB on the left and you see UVA on the right, and you see the red and the blue line, and you see that that's really everybody else's mineral sunscreen. Well, people say, well, wait a minute, I thought mineral sunscreens were safe and they were non-toxic. And the answer is, well, they are safe and they are non-toxic to some degree. However, they don't provide the real coverage in the UVA range that you need. So that green line is actually the product we developed. And you can see the absorbances all the way across from UVB to UVA. And UVA are the long penetrating rays, which cause DNA damage and aging and wrinkling. And there's another slide we'll show next. The UVB side, excuse me, is where SPF is measured. Remember, SPF has only to do with UVB, the short, high energy rays that cause your skin to burn, but don't necessarily penetrate it deeply, that cause DNA damage, aging,
Mhm.
wrinkling, and if your immune system is impaired, as my poor young guys that got skin cancer, eventually skin cancer, right? If your immune system is impaired and you've got DNA damage going on and mutations occurring, and that can lead to skin cancer. So there's another slide that shows even a little bit better about UVA versus UVB, because a lot of people just they don't really get it. UVA are these long penetrating rays. So if they show that next slide, that's the one that shows the difference between UVA and UVB in terms of the wavelength of light that shines down into the epidermis versus the dermis skin layer. And if they pull that up for a second, they'll be able to
We'll
see.
get that. And while we're waiting for that slide,
Yes,
this is where we're talking about toxins today, right?
sure.
And the people point their finger at the sun as a toxin,
right?
and why the sunscreen industry is so big. And you're defining it a little bit more. You're striating it where there's these two different rays, and we don't, for the purpose of industry, they don't want that knowledge out there because now you'll know all of a sudden what it actually is toxic or not. So the sun is healing in nature. The sun gives you life. The sun gives you red light, green light, blue light, all sorts of spectrum, depending what time of the day you're out. If you're out in the
Yes.
morning, you're going to have amazing healing red light. If
Yep.
you're out midday, you're getting something that's more damaging. And the delineation here, which we don't hear about, is the difference between UVB and UVA. So there is something that it potentially is that DNA damaging cancer causing thing, but we're not even getting protected from it. And sorry, you can dive in a little more.
No, that's perfect, Cash. And so yeah, so this shows a little bit better because people don't realize the UVB is not really getting absorbed all the way deep down into the dermis.
Yeah.
It's getting absorbed by the epidermis by design, and that's what turns your skin pink and eventually red. And if you've ever woken up the next day being really, really sore, it's really the UVA that causes that, not the UVB. And that's because you literally have what in my science vocabulary is chain scission, which is actually division of cells. And of course, you have trillions of cells in your body. There's been a debate about how many trillion, but
Yeah.
a lot of those cells are nerve cells. And if you split the nerve cells, you're going to have pain. And it could be, on your back, it could be on your face, it could be anywhere. And that UVA, as you see, the rays are a lot more penetrating. And yes, you're right. We actually, and there's one last slide we can show, which really describes the toxins and how these toxins combined with the fact that you're not getting UVA protection all the way across the spectrum when you're being overexposed, how that really, and we published this in the Journal of Toxicology back in 2005. And at that time, there was only one group that came up to the speaker. I didn't give the presentation. It was my daughter's, I think, first birthday or fifth birthday or something. I don't know. I couldn't go and present it at the Journal of Toxicology Society meeting in San Diego. But corporate came up, and one of the companies said, "We're sure glad you didn't include our sunscreen in this test result." So that one shows that there are the different lists of endocrine disruptors
Right.
in the inactive ingredients. So you've got two different types of ingredients in sunscreens. You've got inactives, which are not really helping with helping with the sun, but things like parabens. Most people who are listening in know what those are now. I call them plasticizers for plastics primarily. PEG, polyethylene glycol, phenols, phytoestrogens. We talked about soy. There's plenty of others. Flaxseed even has it. Pistachios even have phytoestrogens in them. Shea butter, actually, believe it or not, it has phytoestrogenic compound in it. And genistein is the root of the soy phytoestrogenic one. And then the conventional sunscreens have this oxybenzone, benzophenone, homosalates, the benzylidine camphors, the octomethoxycinnamates, and PABA, which I mentioned before. So those are the quote unquote organic sunscreens. One that's left out there is avobenzone. And avobenzone is what's used in high concentrations now as a UVA absorber. But the problem is with all of these organic sunscreens, when the sun strikes them, these compounds, they start to decompose. Mm-hmm. And they become toxic when they decompose. And in fact, last summer, the big deal was they said, "Oh my gosh, we found benzene in sunscreen." And I'm like, well, 99% of the population doesn't know chemistry, but it's pretty easy to see that if you've got oxybenzone in there and you split that compound up, free benzene is going to come out, whether it's due to heat or light or both, a little bit of energy, those compounds are going to decompose. And where are they going to decompose? Well, primarily on your skin. And so now you've got, toxins on your skin, which, and you and I grew up hearing this, maybe the sunscreen is worse than no sunscreen at all. Mm-hmm. And in fact, this sort of proves it, right? It's like, yeah, your biggest organ is now getting treated with female mimicking hormones, which are toxins by definition, killing cells, including skin cells. and your body's trying to compensate for that. But the good news is, at least according to the FDA, you're not getting burnt, right? So you're getting some false sense of security that you're not turning pink. But on the other hand, you got the UVA, which is the quote unquote silent killer, the long rays that cause DNA damage, aging, and wrinkling, and potentially skin cancer if your immune system's impaired. And but you're not burnt, or at least you're not burning yet. And so you stay out longer than you probably should. And the deep penetrating rays are still getting in there.
Yeah.
So they got the whole thing sort of upside down. And it's terrible to say this, but it took me a long time to figure this out.
Yeah, it is upside down, and there's this false sense of security that develops, right? Like, I'm protected, I'm going to spend extra time because I have this protection, and then you're in that, that FDA thinking of you're not burning. Well, that's just the top layer where you're looking for it, right? The UVA is penetrating and you're burning where you don't want to burn, right? And it's far, far worse, So now it's very important what Gary said about benzene, for example, where science, chemistry, approvals, studies are all done siloed, not functionally, right? Functionally means practical application. I have this chemical, academia will tell me something about the chemical. But the practical application is I'm going to go take this chemical out in the sun. The context is now changing. I'm not in a lab, right? And I'm going to have it on my skin. So those interactions are never considered. And this is why when you say upside down, FDA will tell you you're upside down because they're thinking about what happens in the lab, right? But you're thinking about practical, which is really the questions we need to ask. So yeah, thanks for the slide. This is helpful. So
Sure.
what I know that you've created something, and we're going to talk about that. And you've been kind enough to not only do that, but you've also brought discount codes for everybody, which is going to be
Sure.
great. Where else do we see this? So we've so far talked about sunscreen, but where else are we seeing that our personal care products are what we think are healing or protective are actually toxic?
Yeah, unfortunately, almost everywhere. So you saw on that previous slide, it said active versus inactive substances. So, if you're getting hand creams or skin lotions or shampoos or, pretty much anything you use for personal care, including Vaseline, including Neosporin, most of them, unfortunately, have toxins in them. So these chemicals were put together. I mean, people might want to know, well, why is this chemical concoction put together? What is the deal with these chemists that are making these products? And the answer is, well, first of all, the sunscreens, just to go back for 1 second, the organic sunscreens were developed because they're transparent. So when you put them on the skin, you don't see anything, and your skin's still the same. In Asia, they don't really care if their skin's white, but in Western Hemisphere, people don't like white skin, and of course, you had to develop something that would hide the whiteness, which with zinc oxide is very hard to do, and with titanium dioxide, also very hard to do. So that's one issue. But getting back to your question about other personal care items, so let's say Vaseline, for example, which some people, I can name names, but maybe I shouldn't. Some people put Vaseline on their face every day. Some women to get rid of the wrinkles and that kind of thing. Well, Vaseline is petroleum jelly. It's the Unilever trademark for petroleum jelly, and petroleum jelly has polyaromatic hydrocarbons in it, which are known to be carcinogenic, mutagenic. And so that is the basis, believe it or not. Petroleum jelly is the basis for a lot of cosmetics. It's a basis for a lot of hand lotions, a lot of skin lotions, a lot of ointments. And so that's a big problem. We solved that problem too. And as a matter of fact, that's the thing we're offering everybody who's a webinar listener tonight is we make something called Neutrolium instead of petroleum jelly. And we make a 3-ounce version of this, as well as a 1-ounce version. And it's just 2 ingredients. It's glycerin, vegetable organic USP, which is US pharmaceutical grade glycerin, kosher, believe it or not. And we make one version with that and with ceteroglucoside, which is a plant fat. Those 2 ingredients together make this wonderful gel. And the third ingredient for the water resistant version is with beeswax. So we buy high mountain desert beeswax, believe it or not, from a real bunch of beehive folks that actually are beekeepers, and we mix that in to make it water resistant. So we actually have two different types, and we're offering 80% off, and I think that's in your webinar chat to anybody who goes and wants to try it. So it's an alternative to Vaseline is what it is. It's a lubricant. It can be used anywhere on the skin. It can be used as a lip balm, especially the water resistant version. And it is the basis for a lot of the products that we actually make. And of course, we say if you wouldn't put it in your mouth, don't put it on your skin. Food grade ingredients only. We buy food grade ingredients, not from, China and other nefarious countries that might not have a very good quality control system. We source everything ourselves. We make sure that the ingredients are coming from places in the United States where you can get them. If you can't get them from the United States, in some cases, Japan. We have one ingredient that we put in our sunscreen from France, which is gamma oryzanol, which is a very strong antioxidant, which is another good thing to have to put on your skin in the presence of the sun. So I think the answer to your question is we also make a breath spray and a deodorant spray. So unfortunately, the old Banaka breath sprays that you might remember, they have red dyes in them, and they have preservatives in them that are toxic. Almost all the preservatives that are in cosmetics, personal care products, shampoos, deodorants, they're toxic. Again, definition being they kill cells on contact. These are chemicals that you don't want on your skin, you don't want in your body, because they're toxic, right? You want to support your immune system, you want to support your skin, which is your largest organ. And of course, we do that because we use, instead of, for example, for deodorant spray, we use glycerin water and chelated silver oxide, which is antibacterial and antimicrobial. We can talk about silver maybe in a minute. And jojoba oil and aloe. And that's for a deodorant spray, not an antiperspirant. Antiperspirants, I'm sure most of the people that are listening in know that antiperspirants are not a good idea. There's a reason you need to perspire here. There's a reason that you need to, be able to perspire profusely when you exercise, and that is to get rid of the toxins that are in your body. As a chemical engineer, I'm trained about black boxes. Garbage in is garbage out, and the black box in our case is the body, the human body. And you know a lot more about that than I do. You know more about what's going on with DNA. I listened last night to your folks about receptors on cells. I'm too much of an engineer to understand all the biology involved. So I'm one of those people, like you said, who likes to solve problems. That's what engineers are trained to do. And so by solving problems, my problem solver was get rid of all the toxins. Well, easily said, difficult to formulate to do that. Very, very difficult. And going back 20 years when I started making the sunscreen, I was asking other people to try to make it, and they would always take off the shelf ingredients and put it in. And I said, no, I can't have that, right? They said, well, what's wrong with you? So the deodorant is a great example. We don't want antiperspirants. People talk about, breast cancer. Where's breast cancer coming from? Why are men getting breast cancer now? Well, back after World War II, the chemists and the lobbyists in the cosmetic industry did a great job of saying, well, if you're wet here and you smell, that's antisocial. You shouldn't be able to do that. You shouldn't be around people if you smell and you're wet there. Well, they made antiperspirants and antiperspirants with aluminum oxide, which the aluminum oxide by itself is not necessarily toxic. Neither is talcum powder by itself necessarily toxic, although there's some debate about the fact that talcum powder is actually very toxic, and a big company got sued for that, and they're appealing the suit still, but good luck. But the point is, you're not perspiring, so you're not getting rid of the toxins that your body's trying to get rid of, which are going to build up in your body if you drink anything, if you eat anything, if you exercise. Your body is designed to get rid of those toxins, and the way it's designed to get rid of them is by urination, which of course endocrine disruptors are going to disrupt, and to get rid of it by perspiration, which again, not just endocrine disruptors are disrupting, but if you put antiperspirants on, how are you going to profusely be able to get rid of this by perspiring? And the answer is you won't. It's an antiperspirant. So now the toxins are building up here, right? Which is, here's your breasts, right? Here's where your toxins are building up. So if your immune system's impaired, voila, breast cancer. It doesn't take a big leap of understanding to know that, but unfortunately, we've been programmed to not perspire and not to smell. And that's true more in the Western hemisphere. I mean, parts of Asia too, but there are parts of Europe where women won't wear antiperspirants and they won't even shave their arms. Which is, again, why not? Well, they understand that maybe it's healthy not to mess with anything there because that's where your glands are that are designed to get rid of toxins. So any interference with that builds toxins in an area that you certainly don't want to build them.
Yeah, you're reminding me.
Sorry, go ahead.
We have a study that was actually done in France where they biopsy dissected breast cancer tissue, the actual cancer tumors, and they found that 90%, so 9 out of 10 of the women they studied had phthalates showing up in the breast cancer tissue, right? And where is that coming from? It's coming from the deodorant, it's coming from the cosmetics, the sunscreens, etc., that are ending up because again, you have this lymph area here, right? The lymphs, they start here and they come down and then they get clogged up and they get into tissue they shouldn't. So 90% is not a coincidence, right?
Oh.
We're far beyond coincidence.
Oh.
And to what you were talking about earlier, just to be clear for everybody, because this thought does come up for people. They hear you say, hey, I made something that has 2 ingredients. It's awesome, it's food grade, you could literally eat it. That's how clean it is. And then the thought is, well, the real stuff, the Vaseline or the sunscreen or the whatever, has 50 ingredients. Does your stuff actually work because you don't have the 50 ingredients? Right. So, I mean, some brilliant chemist somewhere said, here's the 50 ingredients we need for this job to happen, which is blocking the sun or healing your skin. So how is it possible that you can create this magic without it? And what I would say, just to be clear, and this is a general thought you need to have when approaching any natural health product, is that list of 50 ingredients isn't the priority, isn't efficacy. The priority isn't how good can this product be. It's shelf life, it's cost, it's what ingredient does the industry already supply. When I go to a wholesaler, custom versus off the shelf are 2 very different prices, right?
Absolutely.
And so that's how products get designed. I'm working with a young lady right now in France who's very outspoken about cosmetics making women sick. And she's trying so hard to make a clean line, and supply chain is her problem. She just can't get the stuff. She knows exactly what to do. She just can't get the stuff, right?
Yes.
So in efficacy, the product working isn't why you see that list of ingredients, right? It has more to do with how long it's going to last, etc. So you really don't need much, right? For something to work, it's 1 or 2 or 3 ingredients, because the priority isn't shelf life and cost, but it's efficacy and it being clean and safe, and that's what Gary does, So having said all that, I tried. So there's no secret here. Everyone knows that I've had skin issues, which is one of the things that drove me to working on the research with the DNA company. Eczema, psoriasis, right? And we're constantly teetering on the edge of good health and bad health, surrounded by toxins, living in a sea of toxins. So I know that if I have one bad week, I will get eczema. And as much as I am the healthiest I've ever been, I also know that that's my outcome. And canary in the coal mine, that's the thing that tells me that I pushed myself a little too hard. I ate a little too much nonsense. I breathed a little too much nonsense, too much stress, whatever, right?
Too much travel, whatever.
Yeah. And what's the response? I could either clean myself out and wait it out, or I can add a little bit of a topical steroid just to get there quicker and then detox, right?
Right.
I have done that in the past. I don't like to use medication, but this one I know, like a couple days of this stuff gets rid of it, and now I have to go back to detoxing and cut the inflammation out.
Yes.
You sent me something which was a topical gel,
right?
food grade that you told me go ahead and eat it, although I didn't. And I'm telling you, for everyone listening here, I had the same, if not better outcome in terms of how fast it worked. And I tried everything. I tried nitric oxide. I was trying to find a natural solution because I am healthy. I don't have eczema, but if I make a mistake, I will get it. That's the first thing that happens to me. Headaches, eczema, right? And that's where I know I've pushed myself too hard.
Yep, your immune
And
system is impaired somehow.
yeah. And I've tried the nitric oxide, I've tried, different gels, and I've tried all the stuff that you see in all the conferences. None of it actually will get rid of the problem. I have to wait it out while I'm detoxing, other than the medication. Your stuff is the only thing that I put on my skin that literally the next day I wake up and it's different. And it works the same pace, if not faster, than the actual steroid. So what is in that that's doing that if it's food grade?
Well, if it could be one of two different types of things that we make. We make something called Nutrisporin instead
Okay.
of Neosporin.
Yep.
And this is that gel that I mentioned, the Neutrolium gel that everybody can get for 80% off. And that has chelated silver oxide in it,
Right.
which is antimicrobial, antibacterial, antifungal, anti-mold, anti-mildew. And then we also make this itch block product, which is
That's the one I was using.
that's
Yeah.
the one. And this is chelated zinc oxide. So this goes back to the story about how this whole company started with sunscreen. We actually take zinc oxide, off the shelf zinc oxide, not treated with anything, not surface treated with silicone oil, like 90% of the products are. We take it and we chelate it with L-arginine. For the folks out there that don't know what chelation is, it's a mild reaction. But zinc oxide, and that if you remember back to that plot I showed with the green line versus the red and blue line, it turns out that zinc oxide, pure zinc oxide, you can't spread it. It's basically what the lifeguards put on their nose. Well, we basically took that and made it into a lotion. And the key to making that into a lotion was we had to chelate the zinc oxide with L-arginine. And by doing that, we are actually changing the surface chemistry of the zinc. And by changing the surface chemistry of the zinc, it never becomes zinc hydroxide. Zinc hydroxide is a salt. And that red and that blue line that I showed on that plot shows that all mineral sunscreens over time, they salt out because water, which we use, yeah, there's that plot again. The green and the blue line is everybody else's mineral sunscreen. That green line is the absorbance curve, not only for our sunscreen, but for pure zinc oxide. So it was a neat trick to try to figure that out. And of course, we patented it because you know what I do for a living. So that green line shows that we have basically taken what the lifeguards put in their nose and made it into a lotion. And the key for that was to chelate the zinc oxide with L-arginine. So that is what you put on, except we call it calamine lotion on steroids, because what it is calamine lotion is potassium, zinc oxide and potassium oxide, potassium hydroxide, which is pink. It's a pinkish looking color. Our product is pretty white looking. And because we use that L-arginine, which is an amino acid, and actually last night they talked about L-arginine a lot in terms of production of nitric oxide, right? L-arginine is the basis for creating nitric oxide in cells, depending on what cells you're, what part of the cell receptors you're activating or not activating with L-arginine. So we've got L-arginine in spades with zinc oxide that you then put directly on your eczema areas, and it healed it rapidly and probably very, very effectively and probably overnight. I know I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, so I have to be careful how I say it. But
you're safe here. No, you're safe here.
I'm safe here. Okay, so it turns out that my kinesiologist chiropractor, who I've known since '84, who does muscle testing, helped me develop the sunscreen. We make an aromatherapeutic version, which is rosemary and frankincense, and an unscented version. The rosemary and frankincense version muscle tested positive for every single person. But the reason I bring that up is that this chelated zinc oxide product, which is in the sunscreen and in the what we call the itch block product, changes the pH as well. So it's very, very alkaline. And it turns out that zinc hydroxide also cannot form at a pH below above 9.5 to about 10.5. And it can also not form at a pH of 3. Well, 3 is very, very acidic and not healthy. This Warburg guy that your audience probably knows about discovered many, many years ago, back in the 20s and 30s, that cancer cells cannot grow in an alkaline environment. So that was another reason when we went with an alkaline product. And of course, our sunscreen has just glycerin, no water, so it doesn't evaporate. Well, the itch block also, no water added, so it doesn't evaporate. There is some water in there because we chelate the zinc oxide with L-arginine in water. And then, believe it or not, we have to use a centrifuge to remove the water. So it's a very arduous process. And I don't recommend that anybody try this at home. And what we do is kitchen chemistry, and kitchen chemistry sounds easy until you try it in your laboratory.
No, for sure. And I appreciate that because I've formulated things in the past, right?
Right?
And it's nowhere near as simple as people think. Like, oh, I need to make some supplements. Here's 5 ingredients. Put them together. What's the dosage? What's the negative interaction between them? One voids the other one out. Those types of things to consider. And I can't imagine trying to come up with something so clean but so effective. I mean, kudos to you. Brilliant work. So,
Hard to do, as you mentioned. And the reason is, like you said, it's a supply chain issue among other things. It's also, why would you try to make things different now? We've been doing it for
yeah,
50 years. Why should we change?
yeah, yeah, for sure. So, I heard the stat the other day that smoking has come down, but lung cancer has gone up
Hmm,
because of what we're breathing,
right,
right?
right,
And so the air is now like as if you smoke, right?
sure,
And the reason I bring that up is how ubiquitous this stuff is. You're walking around in toxic soup, right?
yes, yes,
And so we've been talking about products and how to, you know, how to replace what's in your medicine cabinet, right? Which is very important. And you've been kind enough to bring an 80% discount. That's not a typo. It says 80% discount, so that people can just experience and see what's possible. And it's
sure.
very kind of you to do that. The 80%, I'm sure you're losing money at that point, but you're
We're not making any.
so it gets people an opportunity to test things out, right?
Absolutely.
So that's one thing, but the other thing is what else do we have to think about in terms of what is ubiquitous that's sort of flying under the radar that we're not aware of?
Right. Well, so you brought it up. I just, like you, I travel a lot because I also do patent work. And I went to an international conference in Singapore last November, and I also teach a course on sustainability at Duke. And what was really amazing in Singapore is that I could buy all the same products that I could buy in the United States. I went to the grocery store there several times. I even tried to get my products into some of the Singapore stores while I was there. I figured, well, why not? I went there for a patent conference, but what I saw was thousands of barges in the Singapore harbor. And
Mm,
you talk about something that's really a silent. Nobody talks about EV barges. Nobody
mm,
talks about the pollution coming off of the barges. Nobody talks about these barges that contain millions of gallons of diesel number 6,
yeah,
which is one of the most toxic substances that you can either breathe or get near, full of polyaromatic hydrocarbons, et cetera, et cetera. So, yes, the atmosphere is being polluted, and that is a huge atmospheric pollution. As a matter of fact, a long time ago, we had a conference where we had developed also a biofuel additive that reduces emissions and eliminates them. And we were up against a company that was putting kites on barges, and they were reducing the emissions of the barges by 1%. And their business plan said, well, by reducing the emissions of the barges by 1% globally, that would be equivalent to all of the automobiles emissions on the planet.
yeah,
So now here we are 20 years later, 15 years later, it's even worse. We're importing and exporting stuff to every part of the globe. And the
mm,
number of barges that are out there just continues to increase exponentially. So that's the air pollution issue. Now, what I talk about is chelated silver oxide because that's, in a way, something that can help prevent mold, mildew, fungus issues that your body may have a hard time getting rid of in the presence of these toxins that you're breathing or drinking. People say, well, wait a minute, silver, I know colloidal silver, I don't know chelated silver oxide. We chelate with citric acid. So that's probably the subject of a whole nother, webinar maybe, because you talked last night about the cell receptors and how certain things get turned on or off, and certain receptors can accept, let's say, arginine to make more nitric oxide. For example, Dr. Lara had mentioned that. Well, with citric acid, it turns out citric acid is good for any aerobic cell. It's part of the Krebs cycle. It's part of what causes energy, which is part of the cellular cycle, right? They even call it the citric acid cycle instead of the Krebs cycle. And ATP, which is energy for the cell. And you know more about that than I do, Cash. But the silver oxide we make is chelated with citric acid. So we take an inorganic molecule, combine it with an organic molecule, and we have this very different silver compound, which gets absorbed by the cell, all the cells, intracellularly, quickly. And that wipes out all infectious bacteria, as well, everything we've exposed it to, as well as mold, mildew, fungus, which is unfortunately pretty much everywhere. And I tell people this, when you travel, whether it's on a plane, in the airport, in a restaurant, a hotel, whatever, and of course during COVID, we all found this out, you're going to be exposed. And then the only question is, can your immune system handle that? Like you said, when your immune system is slightly impaired, you know it because you've got eczema. When my immune system gets slightly impaired, I can have a lot of different things happen. So why silver? Well, because it works. It's agnostic when it comes to bacteria. It doesn't wipe out certain strains of bacteria. It wipes out all strains of infectious bacteria. And people say, well, what about good bacteria? And I say, well, yeah, it could wipe out some good bacteria, but hopefully every time you drink and every time you breathe, you're bringing in good bacteria. So your body, maybe you could take a pre or probiotic along with it if you needed to. But if you ever get E. coli poisoning, which is food poisoning, basically, God help you, right? You drink this stuff and it's gone. You'll wake up the next day not thinking about what you ate. You'll wake up hungry. So, it's true. I think somebody said something about, citric acid coming from corn. It does come from corn. Mostly in the United States. We buy a GMO product, which is from corn, but the thing that people don't understand is it's so far removed from corn. If you've ever been to a corn processing plant, they make cornstarch and they make animal and human feed from corn, and that's about it. And then they also can extract citric acid, but it's so far removed from corn that even if you have a corn sensitivity, it's the likelihood of you having any effect from citric acid is about zero. I've never heard of anyone having a problem with that, because citric acid is the life form for keeping your cells healthy. And we talked from the very beginning of this webinar, we talked about the fact that cells that don't die are not being exposed to toxins, or maybe they die like your skin cells die because they're supposed to, because your skin always is renewing cells that die. But citric acid keeps cells healthy. And I view citric acid as that black box again, where I'm not talking about what's going on inside the black box as much as you are with the DNA and the cellular structure and the different pathways where things are being turned on or turned off, depending on what's going on at the surface of the cell or inside the cell. But citric acid is going to get into every cell like instantaneously, and it's going to be you'll have the opportunity to keep them very, let's say, energetic, right? It's part of the ATP, it's part of the Krebs cycle, it's part of the citric acid cycle, whatever you want to call it. And I don't know your view on all that, but it'd be good to hear, to tell your folks what you think.
Yeah, in production and formulating, what's misunderstood often is that, you're something from corn. So it feels like corn has been like mashed up and grounded and turned into a powder, but you're actually isolating a molecule, right? So that's all you have is the molecule. This is where you see, somebody like Bill Gates will drink water, sewage water, from a filtration system because he knows all he's getting is H2O, even though 5 seconds earlier it was mixed in sewage, but completely isolated. So the thought might be gross, but when you have technology, whether it's membrane or whatever filtration system, it's an isolate. So there's nothing there other than that thing, the citrate. So the gluten is not a concern at that point. And since we answered a question, we might as well jump into more. Uh,
Sure.
and I can tell you what Gary just said about the gut. I was at a conference. It was is it Denver, the low carb conference? Is that Denver?
Yes.
Yeah, so we were
Yes.
in Denver, and there's a woman that came up. I was actually talking to Gary, and I actually was getting a bit of a tingle in my throat. So I walked up and said, "What do you got?" And he sprayed some silver in my throat. I said, "Don't worry, I'll be gone tomorrow." So there's another lady that came up and thanked him, and I was listening in and eavesdropping a little bit. And she essentially had a gut issue from whatever she was eating the night before. Gary handed her over the silver and said, "Take this. It's going to kill whatever's disturbing you." And it went away. She literally, when she came to tell the Gary, like, "What is this stuff? How does this work? I don't get it." Like, it was just such an incredible outcome. So, but it's true. If the chemistry doesn't lie, right? Silver will kill the nonsense. So take it in and you're good. Okay, let's jump into questions. There's a bunch of them here.
Sure.
Um, there's a couple that were in the chat, so we'll just quickly cover them. Somebody has a actinic keratosis. Was looking for a good sunscreen. So we're talking about food grade, right? So
Right.
irrespective of your skin can. This is the whole point. Is oh, what chemical is going to react or not react? We're not. We're talking about something you can eat, literally. So there is a link here, by the way. If you scroll up, B added a link to the full Third Rock line. This particular product, the Neutrolium, is 80% off, right? Which is the equivalent of a Vaseline. Am I correct? Right?
Absolutely
Yeah.
correct.
So that's the clean Vaseline,
It
right?
is.
So that one, Gary's been kind enough to offer you 80% off, so you can try something that everybody needs in their home anyway. And if you want to see the rest of the line, just click on the link below that. Just scroll up a little bit, you'll see. Um, Now, let me go to the Q&A box. Madeline, what do you think about food coloring for baking? Here we go. It's going to take an hour just to tell you how bad we think it is. So, um, most colors are synthetic, from gut disruption to mood disruption. Uh, in short, not good stuff. There are natural colors out there, uh, hard to find. If you're in your typical grocery store. There are also some colors that cause allergic reactions because they come from insects and shellfish and these types of things that have certain proteins that people can't handle, right? You just have to be careful about the source also. Madeline, do you recommend zinc powder with coconut oil? So how would that compare? Mixing a zinc powder with a coconut oil versus your formulation?
Well, I always caution people because I tried it myself, right? I started this whole thing in my garage. There's a big problem making your own sunscreen, whether you take zinc and mix it with anything or whatever you use, zinc powder, zinc oxide powder. The problem is dispersion. So you've got to be able to mix this stuff at high speeds, and you've got to have the right viscosity, you've got to have the right equipment, and you've got to do it in a large enough batch so that you make what's known as a pinhole free film.
Mhm.
It's essentially impossible to do it and make it homogeneous in a kitchen,
Mhm.
even in a garage with a small amount. You really need a large kettle. You need to mix it. You need a homogenizer if you can get one, and you need a lot of heat, and you need a long period of time. What happens is if you don't do that, you might have something that works for a little while, but the film develops pinholes on your skin. And if you do that, you might as well not put anything on because the sun will go right through the pinholes. So you're basically putting something on that is maybe equivalent to a plastic wrap with a bunch of pinholes in it, and
Mhm.
the sun will go right through it. A good analogy is an umbrella that my daughter actually was under one time at the beach, and she thought she was being protected. She didn't even put anything on, and she's very light skinned. And about 3 hours later, she was as red as a lobster because the umbrella had holes in it. It was creating shade, but the fabric was porous. So that's the problem with doing it yourself, and putting it in coconut oil is not a bad idea. The problem with coconut oil and zinc together is it's not going to give you the SPF you think you're getting. And it's definitely not going to give you UVA protection that you think you're getting because you're using zinc oxide.
Mm. Yeah, so that's you don't have the coverage, right?
You don't have the coverage, and unfortunately, you don't have a product that's homogeneous and that you can depend on.
Yeah. So Curtis is asking, I'm adding a high dietary RNA and high protein superfood to my smoothie every day. Would you consider the supplement safe and advantageous? I appreciate your advice. So to be specific on which one, what exactly it is,
Right.
you know, there's a ton of things you can look for, like sucralose could be a problem. The actual bottle itself, you know, the black, you mentioned the polyhydro, what do they call polyhydro or
Polyaromatic hydrocarbons.
polyaromatic, yeah, yeah. The black plastics typically have those, right? So
Yes.
you'll often find that, and especially if you let it sit for a while and you're not using it quickly enough,
Right.
that could be a problem. But there are some products that are great and clean. It's like read the label, and if it says whey protein isolate from New Zealand, you're probably good because it's one ingredient, right?
Right.
If
Right.
it says banana flavored protein cocktail and there's a giant label of ingredients, it's probably not so good.
Right.
Right. So you have to be careful what's in there. And other than the thing you want, all the additional words that you can't pronounce, the more of those you see, the better, the more you're putting it back on the shelf, right?
Right.
So, okay, Richard is asking, what genes or combination of genes are important to clearing endocrine disrupting chemicals from the body other than melanin levels? Are there genes that are important to combating sun-related skin damage? So, genes for hormone disruption. So the genes that clear other toxins also clear hormone toxins. So your glutathione pathway, which you could potentially have what's called a copy number variation, gene missing, don't even have it, right? Major exposure for estrogen metabolites, 4-hydroxy, 16-hydroxy estrogen, these toxic DNA damaging metabolites. It's also your COMT as it's known, which is a it's typically spoken of for neurochemicals, removal of dopamine, adrenaline, and how it affects your mood. It also affects hormones because it's the same tool that your body will use specifically to clear 4OH, that real dangerous cancer-associated DNA damaging metabolite. And then there's your actual antioxidative genes like mitochondrial resilience, so SOD2, SOD2, if you're actually looking at your report, GPX, that combination of hydrogen peroxide synthesis and then removal, which also then goes to your next question about sun-related skin damage. It's also that. It's your mitochondrial function, which gives you that resilience. It's also your estrogen. You know, high estrogen is better for skin, low estrogen is not. There's going to be more skin inflammation if you're highly androgenized, right? Testosterone. So there are some things you can look at. And now let's jump to Leslie. How is shea butter an endocrine disruptor?
Good question. I didn't know it was, but it's a phytoestrogenic compound. So the shea butter comes from a plant, and the plant itself is phytoestrogenic. But the problem is people love shea butter. It's very, very soothing to the skin. It's very
Yeah.
smooth. And at one time, I considered putting it in my product, but my sunscreen was non-endocrine disrupting, cytoprotective, immuno-enhancing sunscreen. So I got to live by the patent I filed and the composition I make, and so we don't use that product.
Yeah.
We don't use shea butter. Um, I'm not saying it's highly estrogenic, but it's partially estrogenic.
Look, if someone's using shea butter, you're doing better than most that are buying chemical-laden tubs of, synthetic nonsense. But there are some outcomes, which is hormone disruption. And if it's like if you're using it to the point where you're actually causing hormone disruption, like daily, there's another problem you need to solve, right? Why is that happening to your skin? Why are you in that state? There's something underlying that you need to address as opposed to I only survive with my shea butter. That's not good enough, right? So Lynn's asking, what is the safest body lotion to use? Um, do you actually make a body lotion?
Well, we make the Neutrolium as a gel, and we actually do make a night serum now, which is on our website. We just started making this product. We're trying to reformulate it a little bit because people complain it's a little sticky. You know, all of our products are glycerin based, and glycerin by itself is a very it's a sort of a sticky compound. It's a humectant. It brings water in to the skin. So we do make this night serum, and we also make something called tension release gel, which has arnica in it. Again, using the neutrolium as our base for a lot of these products, for all of these products that are skin-based products, other than the sunscreen. Sunscreen glycerin-based too, but it's got a lot of other things in there to protect your skin from the sun. Um, Getting back to the question, the answer is you don't want anything in it that is potentially a phytoestrogenic compound. You don't want anything in it that is potentially polyaromatic hydrocarbon, which means no petroleum-based compounds. You don't want carbagel in it, carbapol they call it. It's a cellulosic compound that is highly chemically treated. So it's very, very hard. I think the answer to your question is what Cash said earlier, is keep the number of ingredients down to less than 10. If you can keep it to less than 5, then you know you've got something that's probably pretty good. But again, it really depends. There is an app, and I'm trying to remember the name of it right now, but there is an app that you can go to that ranks compounds. You can also go to ewg.org that ranks products. I call that pseudoscience. It's okay. There's some products that get ranked high that probably shouldn't be because they still have some toxic substances in it. My view is if you read the label and it's not something you put in your mouth, I don't think you should put it on your skin. That's getting that's a pretty high ranking that you have. It's a pretty high, what do you call it? Scale that you have to overcome to be able to do that. But I would recommend that the number of ingredients on the label are really important, especially the inactives if you're using things that are antimicrobial, antibacterial, like Neosporin. Triclosan is a real no-no. It's trying to be banned by the EPA. Triclosan is a preservative. Most of the preservatives, most of the emulsifiers, unfortunately, are toxic, meaning they kill cells on contact, and they're not good for putting on your skin, and they're not good for getting in your mouth. So, and remember, kids, infants, they put everything in their mouth, right? It doesn't matter if you put it on their skin. They're going to find a way to get it from their hand to their mouth. And you know what? There are plenty of adults that put stuff in their mouth all the time. You don't even think about it. It's just a habit, right? You're touching your mouth without even thinking about touching it. So if it's something that you wouldn't physically put into your mouth because it's safe, I wouldn't put it on my skin.
Yeah, what Gary said you have to pay attention to, which is when you eat something, what ends up happening, ultimately it's nutrients in your bloodstream, right? After going through this digestive process. And putting stuff on your skin, again, false sense of security. It's not in my body, it's on my skin. It takes 26 seconds for something that you put on your skin to enter your blood, which is actually much faster than the metabolic process of eating food. The difference is your stomach doesn't get upset and you don't know you hurt yourself, right?
Right.
So it's actually a much more potent and faster dose of whatever that danger is. So yeah, if you don't eat it, don't put it on your skin because it's equivalent. The net outcome is now in your bloodstream.
Yeah, I mean, a good
Sheila,
example are those skin patches, right? That people use for pain relief.
yep,
They're filled with salicylic acid, which is aspirin, which is something I would put in if I'm desperate for pain relief, like headache or muscle ache or whatever.
yep,
But the point is, yeah, transdermal patches have been made for what, 50 years, and they work.
they work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sheila, hey Sheila, good to see you. So Sheila's a dentist in the Bay Area, by the way.
Hi, Sheila.
We've done some work together. So she's asking to comment on toothpaste and floss. Sheila, how much time do you have? So, commercial dental floss, you're taking this stuff that again is full of toxic nonsense and rubbing it across your teeth and often cutting your gums and creating a wound to put the toxins and deposit it right in, right? And same thing with toothpaste. I mean, go to your local health food store, find something natural and clean. You're finding guys like Paul Saladino, this doctor who is this carnivore advocate who doesn't even use toothpaste anymore. And I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying there's other things you can do. There's charcoal-based stuff. There's plenty of good stuff you can do. Floss, you got to be really careful. I understand the value in flossing, but what commercial floss is made out of, nonsense. Big, big bad.
And we've been approached to make stuff for the gums because of the silver. And we actually sell a ready to drink silver,
Right.
150 parts per million ready to drink product, as well as we sell it, in a concentrated form, the chelated silver. And this stuff has been shown to wipe out gingivitis and actually help gums regenerate, which I know your dentist friend is saying that's not possible, but that's happening to a lot of the people that I actually am supplying this to. And ozonating gel, where ozonation also sort of stops gum disease and helps people that have all kinds of gum issues. So I would say, you want an antimicrobial, antibacterial substance. Our silver does work for that. The problem is that if you rinse with it, every day like I was for a while, your dental hygienist is going to be very angry because you're going to have a lot of people there with stained teeth.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding.
You don't want to use it every day to
No.
squish your mouth because your teeth will get stained over time. But
Yeah.
for people with gum issues, getting the gel at the gum with the silver in it, good way to go.
Well, Jan's asking red light therapy is a toxic. Red light is a healing light. Keep in mind the sun is not just the sun. It's red light, blue light, green light, white light. It's a whole spectrum of multiple things, and different times of the day give you different outcome. And red light is sort of the most spoken of in terms of healing, mitochondrial, stimulating. So no, it's highly beneficial. Andrew, how do you prevent Argyria with your silver spray? I thought once silver reacts with sunlight, it turns your skin blue. Oh, there's some. Anyways, you can go ahead, Gary. I've heard you talk about this before.
well, enough silver with enough sunlight over a period of time, the silver will oxidize and it will turn black or blue or different colors depending on what oxidation state the silver is in. What happened is arginosis is something that was developed, I think, primarily because a lot of governments don't want people using silver. The pharmaceutical industry hates it because it works. So arginosis is literally sickness from silver. And there was a guy who turned himself blue, lived in Kentucky, drank enough silver every day so that he literally turned himself into a Smurf. And he was blue. His skin turned blue. He wound up dying not of arginosis. I don't think anybody ever has because I don't think you can. But he did die from a heart attack. So the term blue blood comes from the French aristocracy, who were very pale, but they ate off of silver plates and silverware and silver goblets every day. So they ate everything off of silver, and their blood did turn a bluish tinge color. What people don't talk about is the French aristocracy did not die from bubonic plague.
Yeah.
Right. So getting a little blue isn't, unless you don't like the color blue, getting a little blue is never going to hurt you. But I can understand your point is that if you got enough silver on your skin and the sunlight hits it, it will turn it blue over time. And I wouldn't recommend that you lather silver on your skin and then go out in the broad daylight with it. And of course, our sunscreen doesn't have silver in it; it has zinc in it. It's a big difference.
Yep. Barbara, when dermatologist removes a skin growth mole, they recommend Aquaphor, which is a petroleum jelly. Does Third Rock recommend the regular or water resilient Neutrolium for this purpose?
For the purpose of?
For the purpose of, she just had a skin growth or mole removed. So she now wants to replace the petroleum jelly recommended with Neutrolium. Does she need the water resilient? I mean, I guess
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So the answer is the reason we make two different kinds is the water soluble version goes right in. It sucks into your skin. Your skin's a sponge. You might not think of it as a sponge, but your skin allows things in and allows things out. It's just like a sponge. When you squeeze it, it comes out. You put it in, it goes in, and there's a lot of pores in your skin. So sometimes you want something that'll soak right in. So I'd recommend, for example, in this case, I'd recommend you have the water soluble to immediately, soak in, get deeper down into the pores of your skin, maybe even into the dermis skin layer that far. And then to make sure that you have it on your skin for longer, the water resistant version. The reason we made two versions of the Nutrisporin product was a nursing care facility was trying it out for UTI. And it turns out it wiped out UTI and stopped it from coming back. And the woman that ran the nursing care facility says, I've also got patients that are bowel incontinent, and I want to have something that lasts longer on the skin. And so the water resistant version obviously lasts longer on the skin. So for the bowel incontinent people, that was very helpful. So again, I would say water soluble, to use it like iodine or anything else that you would want an immediate, immediately get rid of the infection or potential infection, and then put the water resistant version on to let it heal over time.
Dirk is saying, I spend a lot of time outside, distance running, 1.5-acre garden, which sounds awesome. How do I protect myself? Since I wear timing is a big deal. If you're doing your gardening, it's like before 10 a.m., again, generalizing, and after 4 p.m., the light is very healing. It's that midday light that has that UVA and that, that problematic toxic light that everyone tells you the sun is bad, right? So timing is a big deal. Covering up is also a big deal. And then, of course, if you do need to be out in the middle of the day, this is the whole point of why Gary made what he made. He's created something that will literally protect you. And it's clean, and it's so clean that he will eat it, right? So that's, I think the answer, timing is a big deal, especially if you know there's work to do. Like when are you actually outside doing it? Morning and evening. There's still light up until 10, and there's still light after 4, but you're trying to avoid that midday sun for long periods unless you have protection, right? Dirk, does Third Rock sunscreen work for me, or do I need a mix of some mud with some olive oil and spread it?
Well, I don't think you'll need any mud. It just depends on, I do put in every box, I put a little label in on how to apply it. And there is a reason for that, because if you use it like you use regular sunscreen, which is 70% water instead of 70% glycerin, spreads way differently. So a little dab will do you. That's an old commercial from so long ago, most people that are listening don't remember. But this product, very small amounts will last for a very long time on your skin. We actually make it not only in this size, but in a 1.7 ounce product, which lasts me, who surfs and is outside every day during the summer. This might last me as long as 3 or 4 days, because it's really concentrated product, right? There's so much in there, and it's glycerin based. Remember, glycerin does not evaporate. 70% of every single other sunscreen is water. So as soon as you put it on your skin, it evaporates. You lose a lot of it due to evaporation. So just spread it well. What I do is I mix it like this, and then I put it on my face, on my shoulders, on my neck, on my ears. Always make sure you get the parts of your body that have very thin skin. That's where you're most susceptible. So any place your skin is really, really thin, including Cash for his head, right? You got, what, and even if you have hair, I have hair, but it doesn't matter. Your skin is still getting a lot of sun through your hair. Your hair does protect you, but not completely. So put it everywhere your skin is thin, and just rub it and use it. But if you use it as a regular sunscreen, you're not going to like it, because it feels different, and it'll be cakey if you use large globs of it. So read the card that comes with the product.
Yep. You have a fan here. Anne Louise is saying, I'm a huge fan of Gary's products. She's grateful for the discussion. Can Gary discuss all of his product lines? So just a quick run through of the lineup. What actually is available?
Well, Anne Louise is a precious dear friend, and if people don't know her, she's only written 36 or 37 books that are all New York Times bestseller. And I call her the grande dame of women's health and beauty, and she is. So my product line has got everything from itch block that Cash first talked about at the very beginning for your eczema. It's a concentrated version of our sunscreen. People were using it for beehives and for hives and for bee stings and for mosquito bites and poison ivy. And so we said, well, we'll just make a concentrated version of it. Now this is whitening. Okay, this is going to go on more like what the lifeguards put on their nose, but it's chelated with L-arginine. And then as you know, we make the petroleum product that everybody's getting 80% off basically at our cost, and we're just shipping it to you for basically no money. And this is the basis. This 2 ingredients, glycerin and ceteroglucosides. Ceteroglucosides of plant fat, and that plant fat is something like when you boil vegetables, you see globules come to the surface. That's the plant fat that we put in here, And that's why there's only 2 ingredients of food grade edible. If you add a third ingredient, which is beeswax, it makes it water resistant instead of water soluble. So we make 2 versions of the Neutrolium, 2 versions of the Nutrisporin, which is an alternative to Neosporin, wipes out UTI, stops it from coming back. We have a preclinical study on that. So the other one is the water resistant version. And then we make the chelated silver oxide. So people think about silver, they think about colloidal silver. This is chelated with citric acid and powder silver, completely different, 4,000 parts per million in glycerin and water. We take this and we dilute it down to make a ready to drink product, which is the 16 ounce. And we have a spray bottle so you can carry it with you on the plane. This is the only product that we make that is not TSA guaranteed. It won't get on the plane with you. You have to ship it underneath. These other, all of our other products make it on the plane, so you can carry it anywhere you want to. Then we also make the night serum we talked about with intelligent threads. That has bakuchinol instead of retinol A, because retinol A is synthetic. Bakuchinol is food grade edible. And we make a tension release gel with arnica in it. Arnica, as you know, is an anti-inflammatory, and it's again in our Nutrisporin. In our Neutrolium gel. And we make a deodorant spray and a breath spray. We make both. These are both with silver, chelated silver oxide. Then we also make a supplement with citric acid, zinc. It's a zinc chelate. We call it High Z. Don't take much of this. You only need a few drops a day. It'll bioabsorb rapidly. I believe that supplements should all be liquid based. And then I saw somebody make a D3K2 product, which is vitamin D with K2, D3 with K2, which you talked about last night on your webinar about the whole raison d'etre for vitamin D and how important it is with nitric oxide and all that. Again, we chelate it with citric acid, so it absorbs into all cells. It's bioactive and bioavailable, and so cell receptors are important. But with citric acid, I think you sort of bypass that by getting the D3K2 into the cell immediately. We call it liquid sunshine. And then we make the liver cleanse product. I know somebody had sent in a note today about the liver cleanse and about removing brain fog. The liver is your biggest internal organ. This product right here has 4 ingredients in it to support the liver, including alfalfa, dandelion, ginseng, and magnesium citrate, which cleanses the liver. And so we don't put citric acid in here. We put magnesium citrate in here. And I think, Cash, you probably have just started to try this stuff. I don't know how well it's working for you. And then, let's see, is there anything else? We make a rash block product. We also make, instead of Nutrisporin, but we make the Nutrisporin in 3 ounce jars, as well as the rash block. The rash block, nobody knew what it was. It's 75 parts per million silver. This is 100 parts per million silver. So that's a pretty good. Of course, 2 different flavors, the sunscreen, the unscented, and the rosemary frankincense aromatherapeutic. Aromatherapeutic, again, muscle tested positive on over 200 people. If you don't know about muscle testing, that's the subject probably of another discussion later. And then we also make an infant product. We don't sell a lot of the infant. We haven't really gotten into the community of people that have a lot of kids. Maybe next time.
Yeah. So, and again, Gary's been kind enough to bring you an 80%, you're hearing that properly, an 80% discount on one of the products, so that you can just try it and see what's possible. So try that. Click on the link, it's in the chat. Laura's asking, what if your genetics say you should not do L-arginine? I've seen some people that have like viral type issues that react to L-arginine. Like some people that have, for example, the herpes virus or some kind of dormant virus, it will act up when they have L-arginine. Other than that, I don't see any problems. I don't know, Gary, do you know more about that?
Well, here's what I do know about L-arginine, and it's a little scary. Most of the L-arginine comes in HCl form. It's L-arginine HCl. We don't use that. There's a lot of reasons for it. The L-arginine HCl, there was a study done in Switzerland years ago that showed that men that were taking the L-arginine supplement that was the HCl, which is the salt. HCl is hydrogen chloride. So if you take the salt version of L-arginine, the amino acid, it was actually not beneficial. It was actually causing potentially more problems, especially with the heart.
Mm.
So I use L-arginine free form in all of our products, which good luck getting it in the United States. You will not get it sourced out of the USA. We source it from Japan, from a Ajinomoto. Very expensive. And I had it in my car one time, and I don't remember who it was asked me, "Are you transporting cocaine?" It's a white powder. It's very pure, and it solubilizes in water pretty rapidly. The HCl product, when you put it in water, what happens is the HCl falls out. So you have a much harder time solubilizing the L-arginine HCl product than you do just pure arginine.
Derek is asking, will red light therapy heal and damage from the UVA and UVB? So red light therapy in general is healing, creates resilience in the cell. What should somebody do if they have UVA, UVB damage?
Great question. So, well, I love aloe. We actually don't use reconstituted aloe in our products. We use pure aloe that directly from the whole leaf. Aloe is a great healer for skin damage. We've been asked to make an after products sun product, which I think we may wind up making this year finally, which would be our Neutrolium gel with aloe. The problem with aloe and Neutrolium gel is shelf life. And what happens is aloe's got a whole bunch of botanical, herbal, and microorganisms that come along with it. And if you take aloe that's drinkable, which is what we use, and mix that into your products, you got to make sure you have something in there like silver, for example, that will wipe out the microbial action. And of course, when you do that, you don't get all the benefits of aloe. But that anything with our Neutrolium gel with aloe combined, I think I mentioned my daughter being under the umbrella and getting red as a lobster. That's what I treated her with. I treated her with a combination of Neutrolium gel and the aloe, and she wasn't going to fly back to Germany the next day after the wedding. She was so burnt, but within 4 hours, her sunburn went away.
Lynn, what is the cause of adrenal adenoma? And what should you do about it? So we're talking about an adrenal tumor. I don't think there's one single cause. There's many. And this entire discussion today, what have we been talking about? All these silent killers that are called toxins. And that's what's driving most cancer. It's hormones, it's toxins, but it's inflammation, right? So again, to answer your question, Lynn, it's not fair to just give you a general answer. In your case, I would suggest maybe connecting with our clinic. B, if you don't mind, we'll drop in an email address there, Lynn. I would highly recommend you speak to someone there so we can get personalized, because there is a lot more that you can do than simply mask it if you understand the why. Again, we can spend an hour just talking about that. So in general terms, inflammation from toxins. To be more specific for you, I think book a call with one of our clinical team, just because of the nature of what you're dealing with. Sheldon, do you recommend certain foods to consume the day of using sunscreen? Well, it's also what to eliminate. Like these seed oils and linoleic acid, omega-6s, they cause skin inflammation, right? So we're in this state of the same people that ate your American diet that used to get skin issues, that now go, say, carnivore, some kind of clean diet that's void of the seed oils, don't seem to have the skin issues anymore, right? So it's one question to ask of food, but it's like, what do I eat? But also, what do you remove? Everything inflammatory, your skin's gonna hit first. But Gary, I don't know if you know of any other specific foods that are.
I do actually, because this is a long journey for sunscreen. It turns out ellagic acid is very high concentration of ellagic acid in raspberry seeds, of all things. So it turns out there are foods that you can eat which will help your skin be fortified, let's just say, for UVA and UVB. And there's actually some research that's been done and some patents that are out there. I know the patent world well, for certain supplements you can take, which will help your skin be prevented from UVA and UVB. Astaxanthin, which is in a lot of products, I think you know about that probably, Cash. Astaxanthin is a great substance that I want to put in future sunscreen formulations. It was going to go into this one. Very expensive to buy it pure and direct, and good luck getting it pure and direct, but it's in a lot of foods, a lot of antioxidant foods, high antioxidant foods, foods such as the berries some of the melons, citrus, all have astaxanthin, but not in high concentrations. So ellagic acid, which is in raspberries, is a big deal. It's in high concentrations, and astaxanthin are the two that come to mind right away. They're probably based on your DNA and based on your composition of your skin. There's probably other things that will also help prevent you from getting burnt as rapidly. And there are people that really don't burn much. And what's interesting about that is they're still getting the UVA damage, even though they're not burning. So, be cautious that just because you're not burning doesn't mean that your overexposure to the sun could not be harming you.
Yep. And that protective melanin, think about sunglasses also, because your eyes need to see sunlight in order to signal to your body to make melanin. That's the trigger. And you go out with your sunglasses blocking that sun, and then your skin doesn't have the melanin that it needs to protect you. We are at time. We want to make sure we respect Gary's time. He's already been very generous, not only with his time, but also with his discount code. 80% off is something you don't see anymore in these inflationary times, where it's usually 80% on. Things are going up, not down. So thanks for doing that. There's also, by the way, anyone here that is interested in, or needing a DNA test, I think there was a code also that was exclusive to Gary's community. So we'll drop that in here. There was one last question. We'll end there. But again, thank you everybody for being here tonight. We're going to quickly get to this question, then we'll make sure we end on time and respect Gary's time. Vitamin E. Do you use vitamin E? Yes, no, and why not? Or why?
The vitamin E is in the sunscreen. We do use it. We use a pure vitamin E. Comes in an oil, 30,000 IUs, and it is a very good antioxidant. It's protective for the skin as well. Do I take vitamin E supplements? Actually, I take fish oil supplements.
Okay. Great. Guys, thank you again, everybody.
Thank you very much, Cash. It was great.
It was a pleasure, Gary. Always informative. Love talking to you.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll do it again sometime soon.
We will. Yeah. This is why people know why I end up at his booth at conferences, just sitting and listening, and learning.
And vice versa.
So, all right, guys. So we're gonna leave these links open for a minute. Yes, there'll be a replay if you need it. Again, pay attention to the links. You have the testing discount. You have the third rock discount. Again, very, very generous, 80% off, so that you can at least experiment and start to understand what's possible with clean product. It does still work. In fact, maybe even better. And so that's there. So we'll keep this open for you. Copy and paste the link so you have them. And thank you again, guys, for attending tonight. Gary, thank you one last time.
Yes,
and
absolutely. I think there's a replay available for these folks later on, right?
For sure. Yeah, everybody will get a replay. And you'll even get the links by email. But if you needed to do it now, just copy paste and you're good to go. All right, guys. Good evening.
Thanks, Cash.
All right.
Peace out.
All right.
Thank you.